Hey everyone, welcome to TechTO and to our kickoff episode of Next in Tech. I'm Swish Goswami. I am here in Calgary, Alberta. Yes, it is actually warm here. It was apparently 18 degrees 2 days ago. I did not go outside, however. I did not believe that. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Trufan. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder that's learned a lot over the last few years of what it means to build and scale a successful startup right here in Canada. Before we begin in the episode, let me just say this. The journey of entrepreneurship is definitely not easy. And this show, the whole purpose behind it is not to shy away from any of the hurdles that we all face. Over the next few weeks, I'll be interviewing some of Canada's top entrepreneurs to the stage, bring them, allow them to share their stories, their highs and lows of their journey. And hopefully you'll leave these conversations feeling inspired to dig into your own work, maybe take away some pointers for mistakes to avoid along the way. This show is about shining the realities off the work, and we want you to stay engaged and be a part of the conversation throughout. Here's some tips for interacting with the show while it's happening. Number one, you can set up your profile with your image and LinkedIn link by circling the circle in the top right corner of your screen. Number two, there's an emoji cannon on the right side of your screen. It's our way of reacting to the conversation. So why don't you guys all go ahead and just try it right now. You can send some applause. You can send some thumbs up, some rocket ships. However, if you're feeling throughout the conversation, hey, I'm really vibing with what Zain has to say or what Swish has to say, unlikely. We want to see it, and we want to see you be enthusiastic, share an applause, share a thumbs up, etc. Thirdly, if you haven't already found it, there's a chat on the right-hand side of the screen to keep the conversation moving throughout the show. So feel free to go ahead, toss in your questions there, submit your questions using the question mark button on the right side of the screen, and we'll answer as many as we can by the end of the show. Now let's dig into today's conversation. Today we're here to talk about launching your MVP. And an MVP, also known as a minimum viable product, is essentially your first crack at a big problem. So imagine that, hey, you have this problem, you have an idea of a solution. What do you do from here? The biggest thing that most entrepreneurs recommend is go and build your prototype, right? Build a prototype of some kind that gives your investors, potential team members, potential anyone really for that matter, anyone giving you customer feedback, anyone giving you feedback in general, an idea of what you're looking to build and what value it could have for your customers. I remember for Trufan, it was 7 a.m. 3 years ago in Vancouver around November of 2018 when I found out that Twitter had approved us to use their premium API, which meant that I could finally pull data from Twitter and use our algorithm that we had been building for the last few months to segment that data for our customers. That feeling was something I had probably never felt before because we had worked so hard towards trying to get this prototype up and running, and to finally get the gates open up and be able to get something out there was such a relief. So what we want to know throughout this discussion is what's stopping you from launching your MVP right now. Again, as I said, we're trying to be a community here. We're all trying to help one another. So drop your thoughts, drop your challenges that you're having regarding your MVP in the chat right now. Also, if you haven't introduced yourself, go ahead. Just say, hey, I'm Swish, XYZ, here's what I do, and put that in the chat as well. I know when I was trying to launch, there was a lot of ideas that I had when it came to a prototype, when it came to an MVP. I actually thought when I first started out that an MVP or a prototype costs a lot of money, and I realized that it really doesn't. Today, the barrier to entry to start a company has really gone down. There's platforms like obviously Envision that allow you to create a non-functional wireframe within a few hours. But more of that later. First, I'd like to talk to you guys all about our guest. Our guest today is Zain Manji. He's one of the first people that came to mind when I was thinking about go-to-market strategies and an MVP. Not only is Zain a varsity athlete who played tennis for the University of Toronto, and he also won Athlete of the Year, Zain is also the co-founder and CTO of Fix, which he sold. And now he's also the co-founder of a company called Lazer, where he helps entrepreneurs with their go-to-market strategy every single day. I'm thrilled to welcome him to today's conversation. Welcome, Zain.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be here. Yeah.
Really appreciate it, Zain. You like that bio too, right? I mean, Athlete of the Year, this is unreal. An athlete entrepreneur. Was there anything right off the bat that you took away from those days at U of T playing tennis that became kind of handy for you in entrepreneurship?
I mean, I think the best thing was just like being part of a team and like trying to work collectively to one goal. And
Hmm.
it's very similar to when you're running your own company with your friends and your colleagues, right? Like everyone at your company is trying to achieve that one goal, and you have to work together in all different departments to, accomplish that. So that was probably my biggest takeaway.
That's fair. And so today, Zane, we're here to talk a lot about MVP, minimum viable product. To kick things off, like what has stopped you in the past from launching an MVP? And feel free to go into examples with your experience with Lazer and even Fix beforehand.
Yeah, so for me, just for a little bit of background, back in the day in university, I was studying computer science and economics at U of T, and but I really loved to build side projects on the side, right? Like Instagram just came out, and all of these cool apps on the iOS and Android store were coming out, and I thought it would just be really cool to build something that my friends could use, and I could just show to my friends, and maybe just help them out in some way or another. um, and I found it really helpful that I was studying computer science because any kind of like tech idea that I wanted to make, I could technically build it. The only thing that was kind of stopping me from building an MVP at that time was maybe like not having an iPhone or not knowing the language or something like that. But for me, I was always like just eager to like just try. And over the years, even when starting Fix, which was my last company, um, you know, I think we quickly learned that the barrier to launching an MVP is actually much smaller than you think. And just to kind of give a little bit of background, so with Fix, we sent mechanics to people's homes to fix their cars. So kind of just like think about like Uber for car repairs. So not needing to have to go to an auto repair shop and spend your whole day there. You can just have a licensed mechanic come to you and fix your car right on your driveway or wherever you are. Um, and it was really cool. Like the origin story of that kind of happened just kind of spontaneously. It was like winter of 2015, and there was ice everywhere in Toronto. And me and my co-founders, we actually wanted to drive somewhere, but too much ice. We needed to get our tires changed because it was still in the summer tires and not the winter tires. And so we called up Canadian Tire to book an auto repair tire change for our car, but they were backed up for around 2 weeks. And so we were like, okay, well, what can we do about this? Like, we want to go drive somewhere now. So we called my co-founder Arv's uncle, and he just came to the house and changed our tires for us. And we're like, well, that was pretty sweet. Like, I'm sure like other people would love this kind of experience. Like, I just saved half a day, didn't have to drive anywhere. Someone came and changed my tires, right? So with us, the very first thing was like, okay, let's see if other people want this. And I think that was like the very first thing that I learned when building an MVP is like, first, before even building anything, just like see if someone wants what you want to build and is willing to pay maybe for what you want to build. And so, we were engineers, so we just quickly whipped up a landing page that just let someone, go to a website and then just enter their name and request for a mechanic to come to their home to change their tire. And that's all it did. We didn't have like a backend. We just had like one page. And whenever someone typed in their email address, it would shoot off into a Google Sheet. And so we kind of made that, we put onto Facebook for our friends and family. And within 1 week, we had 80 people, just basically putting their names down, asking, can we have someone come change our tire? And so we're like, okay, cool. Like 80 people want to change their tire and they're willing to pay $20. But we had no one to change the tires, right? And I think, like people talk about this chicken and egg thing when it comes to like marketplaces or supply and demand. And this is how we started. We just said, hey, does anyone want this? If so, we'll figure it out after. And I think that's like really crucial to understand when building your MVP, because you don't want to invest so much time or money or effort into building out this fully fledged thing that you think is cool without having it validated, with your target customer or market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to what exactly you're looking to validate, though, right? Because like with Fix, for example, there were probably different things that you were looking to validate, right? Both in
Mhm.
terms of, is there obviously a consumer appetite for something like this? Are mechanics even interested in doing this? What would the pricing structure look like on the mechanic side to make it worthwhile? How
Mhm.
did you go about really zeroing in on that MVP and figuring out what do we want to answer with it?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I think we were very naive, right? We didn't know what the right way to start is. I don't think there is, for everyone, I think there's a different way to start it. But with
Mm,
us, like the very first thing that we thought was like, okay, we want to make something that people will want and want to pay for.
mm,
And so, what would that be? Like, what would improve our daily life? And so, on that side, we started from like the demand side. It's like, okay, do people want a tire change, right? Um, and then after we saw that people want tire chains, then we tackled the other side. Like, throughout this whole process, after you accomplish like one little milestone, you set another goalpost right after that, right? And
mm,
you want to achieve that next milestone slash goalpost. And so for us, after we found people wanted to get a tire change, we're like, okay, the next thing was like, okay, who can do the tire change, right? And so that
right.
was the next goal. So now it was more of like, um, you know, is there a mechanic out there that is interested in this stuff, right? And then,
Hmm.
through that kind of through these like milestone settings and goalpost settings, we then do more research into that kind of space. So we did some research, we talked to some mechanics, and we are like, would you do, a tire change at someone's home? And I mean, like now in hindsight, it's obvious. Like people would, like anyone can do a tire change at their home if they wanted to. But yeah, people were down to do it. Like we learned that mechanics, they don't get paid that much at their auto repair shop. That they don't get as much business. That
Mm,
they're paid on like commission, not like a salary base. And so they're always kind of looking for work. And a lot of the mechanics have their own tools to do jobs at people's homes and at their own home too. They fix their own cars. So we saw, hey, this mechanic was interested, and we had, that person do those tire changes and kind of went from there. Mhm.
got it. And just to clarify, like with your MVP, what did the time look like from thinking of this idea to actually putting out this landing page and getting the 80 people? And was there any cost up front as well from your guys' side for that?
Um, I think the only cost that we had was maybe the domain name. Like we just had, and
Right.
this was like a sunk cost that we paid for a while ago. Like we had some domain name just sitting there, and so like for us, we were like we could code, so luckily we could just whip up a quick landing page,
Hmm.
and so there's no cost there. So it took us about an hour or two to whip up a landing page and like sync it with Google Sheets,
Hmm.
and then once we posted that link onto Facebook, we just waited a whole week to see what kind of demand there was. And for us, it was fast because it was like in the middle of winter, so it's kind of like time and place right there. And then, but yeah, I think in that case, we try to make it quick, right? Like I think when you build your MVP, you sort of want to get your answer quickly. You don't want to have to wait like months and months to see, hey, does this thing work or should we pursue this?
Hmm.
You kind of want to know in the quickest way possible. And I would
Got
say
it.
like a week max is probably what you want to figure out. Yeah.
Got it. And then final question before we move on. Um, obviously you had a lot of technical experience, Zain. It seemed like your co-founders as well came from that background as well. What if someone is watching this and they're like, well, I studied sociology or geology or political science, don't have that technical background. What advice would you give them when it comes to launching their MVP?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is you don't need to be technical at the beginning, right? Like when you launch your MVP, there are a lot of no code tools out there, and even like tools that are helpful. Like for us, right? We use Google Sheets quite heavily, and we didn't even have to build a landing page technically. Like we could have just made a Google Sheet, or actually a Google form, and
Hmm.
put that onto Facebook and say, hey, whoever wants a tire change, like fill out this Google form and have it synced, right? Um, and a lot of people do this, right? They first start with a Google form that has a user answer a bunch of questions that feeds it into a Google Sheet, and then you can see from there how much demand you have, um, and that kind of stuff. And then like let's say let's say you get a lot of demand and you want to build an app or something like that. There's a ton of no code tools out there. Like Webflow is great for
Hmm.
marketing pages. InVision and Figma are great for your prototypes. If you wanted to build a mobile app, there's a company called Glide Apps out there that basically lets you build a mobile app with push notifications and everything, just with like drag and drop features. And these no-code tools are really good for getting you to that MVP standpoint and putting in front of customers. And then as you see your demand get fulfilled, you can. Is that a fire alarm?
That is a fire alarm. I could not believe this.
You have to vacate or anything? You're good?
No, I think I'm good. You normally never have to evacuate. What I'll do though is when I ask a question, I'll go on mute.
Okay. That's
so really quickly, then transitioning into the kind of next part. And guys, thank you for bearing with me here. This is not part of the show whatsoever, but I guess Calgary, apartments. I want to dig into the first stages of your journey and what they were like in this, expectations versus reality segment. So this is the portion where I want to go back to the learning stages that you've experienced in the early stages of launching your MVP. And for those of you watching, let us know in the chat if you can, not how embarrassing this is, but what expectations you have about launching, and if there's any questions you have for Zain here. So Zain, in the early days of Fix, what were your expectations of finding product market fit? Were you guys able to find it right away, or did you have to wait some while for it?
Yeah, for sure. So product market fit is interesting, right? Like I think when we started Fix, we actually didn't really have an idea like what that meant, or we didn't even know that technically that really existed, or we didn't pay too much attention to it, right? Like we were just kind of focused on like, are we solving something for someone and are they willing to pay and all of this stuff, right? But over time, we learned that, there's this thing called product market fit, which basically tells you, is your product and is your company, succeeding? And, one good definition of product market fit is for people is when you have an overwhelming amount of demand and you just can't satisfy that demand fast enough. I think that's like a really good way to put it. And so over time, we were trying to figure out, do we have product market fit or not? And when we started out, we didn't really know what people wanted, right? Like we were just experimenting and we were talking to customers and seeing what they wanted to do. But, I think one of the expectations is like, and this happens for a lot of people, I think, is, in your head and in your mind, you might think that, oh, this feature or this, thing is cool. But when you actually put it out there, it doesn't actually resonate with your customers in the best way possible. And I think that was a good learning lesson for myself, where, before you build anything or before you put anything out in the market, you want to, oh, switch left. There you go.
I'm here. Keep going. We are loving this answer.
Sorry. So before you put out anything in the market, you want to know if a customer will actually use it or not. And I think that was a big lesson for us, is like, before we like build anything that we think is cool, like let's just go out and talk to someone and see, will they use it, right? Because you could spend a week or two or a month building something and launching it, and then if you don't talk to any customers beforehand, the customer won't use it, and now you just wasted a month of time and resources to do so. So yeah, like that was one expectation. And then just to touch on product market fit a little bit, with Fix, I think there was aspects of the company that had product market fit and then other aspects that didn't, right? And I, like for example, when it came to tire changes at your home, I think that had tremendous product market fit. Like during the seasons where winter and summer or spring would happen, you have a ton of people asking us, hey, can we get our tire changed? And we just didn't have enough mechanics or enough time in the day to satisfy everyone, right? And so that was a really good example of product market fit for us. But on the other hand, we had other aspects where we didn't have product market fit in the right sense. Like people would ask us for larger repairs and we just couldn't do it, right? So we didn't have product market fit in that sense from that standpoint.
But I really like what you said about how important it is to have those initial conversations off the bat and investing that time into having conversations and talking to customers first before you get so far deep into your development that it's harder to pivot to what people are actually looking for from you. Do you have any advice for folks watching about how to approach those first conversations and, you know, how to stay open-minded to what that feedback is, especially if you're hearing feedback that might not be totally aligned with where you thought your first steps were going to go?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. You know, I would say it does, at the beginning, it does sting. Like when you think that something's really cool, and then you ask someone, hey, do you like this? And they're like, no, I hate it. It's really tricky because mentally you're like, oh man, I thought this was a really great idea, but this person might not want it. And I think like, if we just talk about statistics also, like it's important not just to ask like one person, but to ask a bunch of people, right? Like one person has their own opinion, but you want to talk to a large enough sample that you get like a statistically significant answer. So like usually what I do now is before we release any feature or before we like decide to build something, we will try to talk to like between 30 to 100 potential customers, right? And we'll tally all of their responses and see where they stand and what feedback that they have. And then we'll try to prioritize, you know, what's really important, what's not really important. And then after that, we will like, we'll do the next minimum thing, like build a wireframe and put it in front of their faces and see how they respond. And then after like we kind of do all this stuff, then we'll start building, right? Because, you know, I think engineering time and resources and your own resources and time is super precious. So you don't really want to spend a lot of time building something that people won't use. And I think like even in the concept of a startup, right? When you raise money, or you know, your lifeline is technically the amount of funds that you sometimes have in your bank account, and you want to be cognizant of, you know, all of that and make sure you're not, you know, wasting it or using it in a poor way. So yeah. Welcome back, Swish.
Amazing. Welcome back,
Thank you.
Swish.
Thank you.
You're doing okay.
Guess I was asking some fire questions, but
yes. We got that in the chat from Christian. He said Swish is asking some fire questions. Someone must have called the fire department on you over there in Calgary.
So they're still coming, apparently. Apparently, I'm on the 10th floor, and when we called the reception, they were like, "Oh, it's a problem with the 10th or 11th floor," and I'm like, "Oh, what?" And they were just like, "Just stay in your apartment. It's fine. It'll probably be good." So we will continue. But thank you, Liz.
No problem. Keep it going. We were just chatting about, you know, how to approach those first conversations with customers and what to do when feedback you're getting from customers might not match the original roadmap you had in place. If you have any thoughts you want to pick up on that before you move on, feel free.
Yep. So I think, Zain, one question I had, and this was an experience we had with Trufan, is when we were going through and kind of pitching our MVP to a bunch of potential customers, we realized that we were getting a lot of feedback too. So I just want the question of like, where's the line? Like, where do you draw the line between like good feedback and then like too much feedback?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, there is. See, the thing is like when you ask and you talk to customers and they give you feedback, it's tricky because they might give you feedback that they think is cool, not what they would actually pay for or what they actually like need. And I think there's a difference between needs and wants, right? Like, and when you talk to your customers or try to get feedback, it's really important to try to figure out their underlying motivations and not always ask like questions like, oh, like what do you think would be cool here? But more questions along the lines of like, you know, why do you want to use this product? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? You know, what are you currently doing that you don't like or that's causing you issues, right? And so when you ask these types of questions, you get feedback that sort of like is attributed to their underlying motivations rather than what they think is cool, right? And I think like, you know, obviously you can't control what kind of feedback people give you, and so you have to use your own knowledge as like the product owner to be like, okay, you know, I think this is fair, but I think we can deprioritize this, or I think this is crap, or I think this is, you know, junk, and I think this is like gold, right? And so it depends on like the types of questions and how you ask for your feedback, and then you have to like use your own sort of mechanisms to distill it and prioritize it in the right way.
Got it. And another problem we ran into was when we were asking for feedback. It even happens right now where we're asking for customer feedback, and whenever we do it, they feel like, oh, once I give this feedback, we'll likely see it in action over the next few months. And then they get disappointed when their feedback isn't taken, into consideration and actioned out. How do you go about prefacing, asking for feedback so that people don't feel like when they give you feedback, there's an expectation that you're going to bake it into the product and prioritize it?
Yeah. So like one thing that I say is that, like, if I were to ask for feedback, I say, I something along the lines of like, I would really love to learn, more about why you're using product, yada, yada, yada. But just to let you know that our engineering team is small. The product backlog is very tight. So you can preface this by saying this, that, it might take a long time for the feedback to come in, but, we want to hear the feedback and we want to listen to you because we want to improve the product and the experience. And so, the more feedback that we collect, and if it targets this kind of, if more people have the same feedback, then we can prioritize a little bit higher. And I think it's just like kind of being transparent with your customers is important in that sense. Because like there's another topic of like expectation management when it comes to dealing with customers. And I think you always want to maintain their expectations and not like over promise and under deliver. Otherwise it could lead to things like bad reviews or, poor retention and things like that.
Got it. And then final question to wrap this segment up is, your work at Lazer. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? It's a product studio. I'm guessing that you guys now are working with customers that are looking for product market fit. So talk to me a little bit about your experience building Lazer, and then also, what do you know about product market fit now that maybe you didn't know back when you were building Fix?
Yeah. So, so Lazer is an engineering studio, that we created after we built Fix. Basically, you can think of us as like a ninja squad that kind of comes in to your early stage company or even like larger enterprise and helps you just build and ship amazing products, right? Like I think, one of the things that we learned when we went through Y Combinator was that, you don't need all of this fluff, and you need to like kind of focus on what customers want, and just focus on building that next iterative thing and putting it out in front of customers, and just try to iterate with them so that you can achieve product market fit and grow your company and your product. And one of the things that we wished for when we were at Fix was like, I think, finding and recruiting great engineers is very challenging, right? And we wish we kind of had like sort of like an AWS for engineers, where we can just spin up an engineer that is very senior, that is like a CTO on their own, that can execute and ship really quickly, on demand. And so that's kind of what we do. Like, so we work with like smaller companies, like early stage seed rounds, Series A companies, that are part of the YC or, that are funded by other VCs. And we just kind of really help them ship and build and ship amazing mobile and web products for them. But we don't kind of come in with like this suite of like, hey, you need like a junior engineer, a senior engineer, a PM. We just say you need a really talented like senior engineer to come in, just kind of be part of your team and help you, progress your product roadmap. And so, some companies that we work with are Certain, based out of Victoria, Juni, Nabis, Ribbon Health out of Y Combinator. We work with larger enterprises like the Weather Network, RBC Ventures, and a bunch of more companies. So we're all over on the end of the spectrum. But yeah, the common thing is that people just need a ninja squad to kind of come in and help them build amazing products, and that's what we like to do.
Love that. So now that we've talked a little bit about what you guys are doing, product market fit, some of the early days and what you learned, I'm excited to hear about those first moments that every founder experiences in our next segment of the show, which we call Founder First. So we have 4 questions for you, Zain, about some of the first big moments of your founder journey. For everyone watching, comment in the chat your answers to these questions as well as I ask them. It'd be awesome to be able to see what you guys have to answer. So are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, there. Cool. Yeah.
All right, rapid fire. First time that you found product market fit?
When we had too many requests for tire changes and not enough mechanics.
Got it. First time you thought, what the hell am I doing? There might have been many, but the first time that you vividly remember.
There was a scenario. So I have two stories. I'll say this quickly. One is during winter, we dressed up in a Santa costume and went to Union Station in Toronto, and we started giving out like gift cards or promo codes to anyone who kind of walked into the Union Station terminal for like fixed car, like auto repair. And the reason we thought about that was because like all of these people are commuting by train, but when they go back to their homes, they have a car that they drive to their homes. So they all have a car. So why don't we just give them gift cards and try to incentivize them to use Fix? And we were in Union Station in a Santa suit, and then we were handing out some gift cards, and then like security kicked us out. And at that time I was like, okay, why are we in a Santa costume here? And then the other time was, you know, we eventually did like corporate fleets as well. And we were out in Milton, and it was raining, and we were working at a car auction, and all of the cars that we were fixing was out in this like open, you know, parking lot, and there was like thousands of cars, and we had to basically chalk every single car, like number 1, number 2, number 3, so that our mechanics know which cars to tackle first. And it was raining, and I had like my MacBook in like one hand, and I had my phone in the other, and it was like tethered to hotspot, and it was like dripping in rain, and I'm like, I had to chalk up all these things, but I also, when I chalk it up, I have to go on my Excel sheet and say that I chalked it up. And I was like, man, like, what am I doing? I'm spending like 4 hours in this rain. My MacBook's getting like wet. You know, I was just like, this is nuts. But I was like, I gotta do this, you know?
That's fair. And then like, why not, this is not part of the 4 questions. We have 2 more to go, but just, you know, thought came to my head, like those moments where you're like, what the hell am I doing? Why not just quit? Like, what was it about the underlying idea that was like, I got to keep doing this?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, well, yeah, I'm not really a quitter. So I always like to see things through, but I just knew that, like, you know, having a mechanic come to your house is so helpful. Like I use it so many times. I use it personally still. And I always love the experience. So if I love the experience so much, I think everyone else should love it too. So just had to see it through and see if it could actually become like a reality.
Got it. Speaking of see it through, my fire alarm is done now. So thank you to everyone for you know, great, like, you know, taking this with me and kind of sticking it out. Next question, Zain, the first kind of breakthrough, successful aha moment that you had on your journey.
Yeah, so I think this comes early. I would say there's either 2. One, we won the University of Waterloo Velocity Pitch Competition, and we won $25K to really like kind of double down or like focus a little bit more on Fix. And also the next one was when we got into Y Combinator. That was like a big moment for us.
Got it. Was that before or after the Santa suit?
That was, so getting into Y Combinator was after the Santa suit, I think. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Neat. And the final question is the first step that you recommend the audience takes to launch their MVP. Like, what's that first thing that you would do other than like open your computer? Like the first literal step that you would take to move ahead.
Yeah, just talk to your talk to the customers, see if they're willing to pay, and collect payment, and then figure it out after. You can always refund. It's not nice, but you know, I always believe in like validating your idea and like seeing if people want to actually pay or use your idea first. So just talking to customers and seeing if they want to pay. Something like a landing page that just, or even like a pre-beta sign up, just like collect people's emails and see if they're interested. Yeah.
Got it. Out of curiosity, do you ever offer incentives or rewards to people for feedback? Like, do you give them a gift card to Amazon or something? Or do you just, you know, hope that you're going to find your power users right off the bat and get them onto a phone call?
Yeah, I don't really do the incentives just because I don't have enough money to do so.
Right.
But like, yeah, I would just try to be their friend, you know, like, and just try to be helpful for them. And, you know, if they give good feedback and if they're an early person that give feedback, we can give them like the product for free once we build it or something like that. Right.
Got it. Cool. So Zain, you shared some great stories here, really awesome insights with us. Thank you. One final question for you before we take some questions from the audience. And I know that there's a few questions trickling in, so we'll definitely get those right over to you. If you do, by the way, have a question for Zain, it could be around product market fit, it could be around his MVP, it could just generally be around his startup as well. Like obviously he's had an exit before too, so feel free to ask any question related to his entrepreneurial career. One final question on my end, though, Zain. If you had to restart your founder journey today, so go back to square one, coming out of the University of Toronto, what would be the first steps that you take to really set yourself up for success, knowing what you know now about how challenging this path is and what you really need to know?
Yeah, that's a really tough question because like part of me wouldn't change anything because I think like, when you go through the founder journey, you have to like, you should go through like the ups and downs and failures because that's like the best way to learn, right? Like I can tell you, oh, do this, but sometimes it doesn't resonate with you until you actually make that mistake yourself. And so part of me is like, okay, just make more mistakes and do it. But I guess to answer the question, I think there were some aspects in our company where we might have lingered too long on trying to see something through when we knew that something wasn't going to work. And that might have just been through like stubbornness or something like that. But, it's not really like, don't do that kind of thing. Cause I think like, it's also good to be stubborn because, if you are stubborn and you really want to see something through, like you will try to do everything that you can to see the outcome. But I think that just there are some things that for a fact, like, oh, this is not going to work. So just cut your losses there and do something different. That would have been helpful for us. Yeah.
Got it. And are there things that you would say you shouldn't do? Like, are they like common myths that when you read on Twitter, you're like, that's not true. Like, this is the worst advice I've ever heard. Like, is there any sort of like general advice people get that you're like, this probably isn't something you should follow? Without saying any names.
No, I don't have any names, but I think, this just comes back to like, one thing that I don't like is like, just like spending so much time building something without actually like, putting it in front of any users or something like that, or even like spending a ton of money to build something without like having a customer in mind or anything like that. Like sometimes I see people just like build what they think is cool without getting it validated. And so that's my main thing. I mentioned that quite a bit, but it's just the biggest thing that sticks out to me. Yeah.
Got it. And then really quick question before we get into audience Q&A. Are there any tools you would recommend for customer feedback and kind of compiling all of that together, getting customer feedback? Let's just say from like the beginning stages to when you start to scale. Are there tools that you would recommend for that?
I use Notion quite a bit. So Notion is great because, I mean, like you have like Trello, you have like, notes, you have a bunch of different of like all of these products kind of just like aggregate into one place. So I use Notion quite a bit for collecting feedback. Like you can create like a Trello board or even just like a feedback list, and you can assign it to people or whatever, and you can prioritize your feedback nicely there. That's really good. And yeah, just because I use Notion a lot now, I don't like, nothing comes to my mind that's really good for collecting feedback. Obviously like Google Forms and stuff like that is good when you just want to like kind of, blast a form to someone and collect it via Google Sheets. So I would say, just those two. Yeah.
Got it. So we're going to get into audience questions now. By the way, throughout audience questions, Zain, if I have a question, I will jump into because, there might be a thought that comes from an answer that you give, but we're going to look at the chat now, guys. So feel free to drop in your questions if you have one for Zain. I'll start off with Bruce. Bruce asked regarding a landing page, what was your rule of thumb for signups? Was it you want to get 50 signups, you want to get 80 signups, 100? Like, what was kind of your rule of thumb and why?
It depends on the product, right? Like for example, with Fix, we sent mechanics to your home, so we couldn't like having 1,000 signups would have been nice, but we didn't need that many, right, to kind of get started. So for us, we needed like, I would say like even like 20 people signing up for us at that time was like enough for us to at least start testing it. We got 80 at the time when we did that, but which was great as well. Those 80 customers took us, I think, about 3 weeks to just satisfy, and during those 3 weeks we learned so much. But like, I think you see a lot of like other companies, like there's Beeper, which is like aggregating all of your messages from like iMessage into one place. Like they did a pre-beta sign up list, and I would assume that they would want to see like thousands of people signing up for them to like justify it, because maybe their app price is much smaller, like a few dollars per month, and so you want to see a large amount of people sign up for that. So maybe software, you might want more. Like consumer software, you might want like a larger number. B2B software, you might need like a few companies interested, and then for like service-based things, you might need like 50 to 100 or something like that. Yeah.
Got it. From John, this is a great question, John. I can't believe you stole this one from me. But have you found that investors have a different idea of what counts as an MVP? So like from your kind of, when you're talking to potential customers, maybe they're like, oh, this is awesome. But then investors like, this is totally different from what I expected.
Yeah, it's true. Like I think investors do have a different idea of MVP, but it also depends on like what your market is and what you're actually building, right? Like for example, if you're building, like for us, it was very easy to build an MVP. Like we could launch a Google Sheet and have it work, right? But if you're building like some sort of software in the B2B space, like if you have like a client, like a larger enterprise client that wants you to build some sort of like, let's say like, so one of our clients, for example, they're one of the largest car auctions in all of North America, and they wanted to build a transportation management system. Their idea of an MVP is much different than a normal consumer app, right? Because they have these customers, and their customers want feature A, B, C, D, E, even before like they need all of these features in order to even like try your app, because the alternative already has all that stuff. So your MVP becomes a lot larger. But with them, it's like they were willing to pay, so you are willing to extend the scope of your MVP. But for consumer apps, I feel like you don't need to be that large. So definitely investors have a different idea of an MVP, but I think you have to just be mindful of like yourself when you're building out the MVP, like, what is overboard, what is not. Yeah.
And when it comes to, prioritizing investor feedback versus customer feedback, how do you do that? Like imagine you had, an investor give the same feedback as the customer. Do you view that feedback differently? Do you try to prioritize investor feedback over customer feedback? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, like the customers are the ones that are actually using your product, right? I mean, like unless your investors are your customers, but
yeah, weird.
Yeah, maybe. Like, yeah, but yeah. So I would prioritize customer feedback mainly. Like just take everything with a grain of salt, right? Like take all feedback, but try not to get biased in one way, right? Like the customers are the ones that are actually using your product, and you want to build for them, not for your investors at the same time. Like, I think that would be the most healthiest way to do it. Yeah.
Got it. From Gibran, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. How did Zain approach lots of customers without customers feeling annoyed? So I think this goes back to kind of the question also about incentives, right? Sometimes people feel like, oh, they're taking time away from me. So how do you approach someone? Where do you reach them? How do you reach them without kind of getting them annoyed?
So there's many ways to do it, right? And it depends on your product, obviously. So one way is through like warm intros, through friends and stuff like that. That's one way to get it. When you go that route, I don't think they feel typically annoyed just because it came through a warm intro and they're just kind of happy to help. If you're going through a more cold intro route, there's a way for them. I can see them getting annoyed at sometimes, but there's many ways to do it, right? Like you can join like Facebook groups, you can join Reddit communities, you can join Discords. And I feel like on these like more like community-based platforms, they're more open to helping you just because it's a community technically. But you have to be careful, right? Like I think one thing is when you're approaching these customers, just don't want to come across as spammy or just like trying to use them and then trying to like ditch them or, abuse that relationship. I think you just want to be mindful and try to help them and keep them. If you keep them in the loop and show them that you're trying to build what their feedback was, I think it helps. But yeah, I mean, if customers get annoyed when helping you, like, I guess incentives help for sure.
Fair. From Anatoly, he asked specifically around conversations and verbal buy-in versus PMF through usage. Essentially, did you have any sort of misalignment on what your customers were saying versus what they were doing when they were giving you feedback?
Misalignment on customers, what they were saying versus what they were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough in like that question is kind of tough because with Fix, right? It wasn't like necessarily a SaaS product mostly. Like, so one thing is like, people would like, so with our industry, people would say that they would be using like some feature or not, but in reality, if you went and you actually like kind of put yourself in their shoes or in their seat and you try to do what they did, you would notice that they were doing a lot of like these other tasks manually or supplementary to the feature. So for example, like we built like this admin portal for corporate fleet managers to manage their vehicles, right? And one thing is like they were saying like, oh yeah, we're using this dashboard to like manage all the vehicles. But when we went to go visit them, we noticed that yeah, they were using some features, they weren't using like 80% of them, and they were doing things like taking chalk and chalking up the cars and taking pictures with their phone and storing it onto their phone things. And so we didn't realize that until we physically went to them and saw their operations in person. So that was one way. I think just like you need to do like these like health checks. Like when someone says they're doing something, just like health check it every once in a while to make sure like it's still relevant or they're still finding value out of it. And if they're not finding value out of it, then cut it and try to make the thing that finds value. You got to iterate in that way.
Got it. And then I don't know if this was covered by Liz during the fire alarm epidemic, I guess, but do you ever feel like you get out of the product market fit stage? Like, how do you know when you get out of the product market fit stage?
Like,
is there like a threshold? Is there a threshold to end product market fit where you're like, okay, I found it and I move on?
I don't know the answer to that because I think like product market fit is different for everyone, right? And I mean, like, I don't know, but I would assume if you exit product market fit, then your company is like dying. I would assume.
Right. Fair enough.
That's what I think. Or you need to find a way back into it. I'm not sure.
That's awesome. No, I think that's going to be a good quote too. If you exit product market fit, that means your company is dying. I love that. It's true. It's true. I love that.
Maybe. I don't know.
From Carrie. Carrie asked, failure is part of the journey, and there is return on learning. I love that, by the way, Carrie. What is the greatest learning asset that Zain has in his account? So maybe not the greatest, let's just say some of the top learning assets that you have in your account.
Yeah, that's a good quote. I gotta use that. My greatest learning asset, I mean, like your quote kind of says it, right? Like failures, right? Like I learn the best when I do it myself and I make the mistakes myself, right? And there's a lot of stuff like that. Like the reason why I like harp so much about like validating your idea and like taking these like small steps and iterating is because in the past I used to build something completely out of the blue, spend months on it and then have it go to waste, right? So I think that's one thing. And I think it's also good to have like I think it's good to have like an overview and like knowledge about other aspects of like business as well. Like for example, when I started Fix with my two co-founders, I was very just like engineering driven. I kind of only knew like product and tech and how to build software, but I didn't really know other things like on the unit economic side, on like what retention was, on like what certain growth metrics were. And I think like going through a startup, you learn not only like how to build a product in the best way possible, but you learn like what makes products successful, like what do you need to focus on, what are signs that your product is like dying, like things like churn and things like that. So yeah, just failures and like getting a collective overview of like an entire business.
Got it. Other than experiencing, everything that you had to experience when building a startup, were there any resources, online resources that you went to be able to learn stuff like that around, unit economics, retention, how to scale a team, how to go about managing a team, etc.? Was there any kind of like online resource that you would recommend people check out?
I think YC Startup School is really good. It's just like these videos from YC partners where they cover a bunch of topics like growth, managing a team, software, etc. I think that's really good. On like the growth side, when it comes to software products, I really like this these guides by the people at Reforge. They talk about like growth loops and how to actually measure growth properly, like acquisition, churn, etc. I find that really good. The Paul Graham essays from Y Combinator are really good, just like thinking about product. And like I think most of the lessons that I've learned fortunately have been through like YC, and just cutting out all the fluff and just focusing on like what people want. And so I really like those. And then the last thing is like there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube by like former founders or like even founders of like successful companies that is really helpful, like how to grow your SEO from like 0 to 1 million hits per month. Like there's a lot of these lessons that if it applies to your business, they're really helpful. So I like that. Yeah.
Got it. Final two questions, one from the audience, one from me. From Adam, how did you avoid the trap where an MVP becomes a fixed scope solution versus a fluid solution that validates a testable hypothesis? So essentially unpacking that, I would say, how did you avoid the trap where an MVP kind of just becomes like, this is our vision, we're not going to think of really much outside of it, versus trying to keep it very fluid based on, this is our hypothesis, we're testing it out. If it doesn't work, we can move on to this.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So when you are building your MVP, I really recommend like it has to be like experimental driven. Like I like it to be experimental driven. So what that means is like obviously you have like your vision of like what you think it will become, but again, set those milestones up ahead of time. So for example, you might have milestone 1 that you want to achieve, but and that could be like, hey, I want this product to have feature A. But also when you set that milestone of I want this product to have feature A, set up like success metrics alongside of it. So if you use like a tool like Mixpanel or something like that, you might want to see, okay, when I build feature A, I want to see retention be this percentage. I want to see revenue be this. I want to see churn be this. And I want to see the conversion rate on these funnels be this. And so when you set your goal and your success metrics, when you actually build and launch your feature A, you can then measure them against your success metrics and say, okay, did this work or did this not work? And then based on what you're seeing, you can then set goal B to be something else, right? Like it could be like a iteration on feature A or not. But I find it's really good to have those success metrics kind of defined, because like one thing that I learned, and here's another lesson that I learned, is like you can build a feature that someone thinks that you should build, and you build it and you launch it, and then that person likes it, right? But how do you actually know it's successful? You need to like measure it. You need to see, did it increase acquisition by this? Did it increase retention by this? What did it do from a data perspective? And so it's good to be like, both data driven and qualitative driven in this way.
Got it. One last question from me. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in reaching out and talking to you? What are the best channels to reach you at?
Best channel to reach me at is Twitter. So my Twitter is just my first and last name, Zain Manji. You can just DM me there. The second best way is through email. My email is zain@lazertechnologies.com, Lazer with a Z. But you can definitely get a hold of me on Twitter. That's probably the best way. Yeah.
I love it. I love your tweets, by the way, too. I learned so much. So give Zain a follow, guys. Thank you all for coming on. And Zain, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Next in Tech. Everyone, please help me give Zain a round of virtual applause by sending some emojis from the emoji cannon across our screens. That would be great. But yes, thank you all for coming out. I had a blast hosting today's conversation. If you'd like to get in touch with me directly, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, not Twitter, on LinkedIn. Maybe I need to get more on Twitter, but on LinkedIn, Swish Goswami. And I'm now going to turn it over to Liz so that she can share what's happening next.
Swish, the whole audience is so glad that you're good. Fire alarm is off. It's all good on your end. Please go have a safe day. And I will just let both of you know, halfway through the show, we switched up the emojis to include the fire truck and the fire emoji, and they were flying throughout the whole episode. So the conversation was fire. We are literally not on fire. Thank you so much. And we'll see you back in 2 weeks for the next episode of Next in Tech.
Thank you.
Thanks
Appreciate
so much. All right, so for everybody watching, we want to see all of you back here in 2 weeks as well. So let's quickly go through what's coming up on the Next in Tech series. Our next conversation is around acquiring first customers. That is not a conversation that you want to miss, happening on April Fool's Day. First episode on St. Patrick's Day, second episode on April Fool's Day, but there will be no joking matters happening on that episode, all about acquiring first customers. And then after that, we'll be talking about your first hires on April 15th. So growing your team and expanding, where do you go from here? All your questions answered on April 15th, same time, same platform. And our last episode of the mini series, our grand finale, you do not want to miss it. We've talked about the first, and then we're going to talk about how to take care of yourself throughout the whole process with an episode on managing mental roadblocks. Oh yes, all the first that founders face in their journey to greatness, all of the little moments of what the hell am I doing, like what we talked about today. We're digging into all of it and having a super candid conversation on April 29th. And stay tuned, because there will be a wrap party for this mini series that you're all invited to. Those details coming to you on TechTO Slack later today. So keep watching our Slack channel for more information on the wrap party for this series. As well, we have more shows coming up, and we would love to see you there. On Friday, we have Founders and Funding with our good friends at Array Ventures and Capsule. Alex Norman, you know him, you love him. He's hosting that conversation. And coming up in April, we are back with our prime time show, the fun, the everything you want from TechTO, all the fun, it all goes down with Wonder School and Rap Book. On April 12th, we have Jason in the chat. He's going to be hosting that event. You don't want to miss it. Tickets available for all those shows and more on techto.org. And keep an eye on Slack for your links to sign up for our next episodes of Next in Tech. Now we're going to do what we do at the end of every episode of TechTO, a little bit of time for everyone to meet someone new and learn and grow together. We're going to flip the switch on networking. I'm also seeing that Jason has switched our background to be quite literally fire. So let's do one last fun round of emojis, those fire trucks and fire emojis. Make sure that you tell everyone that today's episode was literally fire. We'll see how many folks we can bring to the next episode. And you don't know what's going to happen on April Fool's Day. So we'll see you back on April 1st. But for now, enjoy networking for the next half hour. I'm Liz. On behalf of Swish, Zain, and I, we are so glad that you joined us today. And we'll see you on the next episode of Next in Tech. Thanks, everyone.